Welcome back to Storytime with Sean S. Today we're doing something a little different. These stories are from my life. No Reddit, no internet drama this time. These stories, I remember sitting there thinking, is this really happening right now? I'm going to be telling you about two of the most epic firings I ever witnessed during my time at work, and they both involved the Wizard of Oz. It'll make sense at the end. Let's get into it. The first story we're going to call The Dictator. It's about the first supervisor I ever had. And you know what usually happens to dictators, right? I will not be using real names because I don't want to get sued, but I'm telling you these stories will be 100% true based on my recollection. My first job out of college was in social services, and I was just super excited to be working. I was thinking I was going to be helping people and I thought, this is going to be great. But I quickly realized that my first supervisor had one major rule. There was her way or no way at all. For the purposes of the story, we'll call her Ursula. One thing you had to learn really quick is if you wanted to get anything done, you had to make your idea look like it was her idea. Yeah, she'd tell you make everything your own and then immediately change whatever you wanted to do to what she wanted. You'd suggest something creative to bring in more clients, she'd shoot it down, and then she complained that we didn't have enough clients. How was I trained? Training was basically read this book and figure it out. Basically getting told nobody's ever been great at this job, so let's see what you can do. I'd ask questions, she'd never really answer them. It would always just come back to just figure it out. Get out there in the community, talk to people. And when things didn't go exactly the way she wanted by a certain amount of time, you'd start getting the look. I can't say that I ever actually gotten in trouble per se. No written warnings, not getting yelled at, but I just knew that I was in danger of getting fired every day. In fact, I spent a lot of the time wondering, is today the day they let me go? I wasn't the only one walking on eggshells. Well, in my case, rolling on eggshells. You know, you see those movies where everybody's at a party or something and there's a character that comes in that everybody's afraid of or hates, and then all of a sudden the music stops with one of those record scratches like, yeah. That with her. One incident really showed me how cruel Ursula could be. We had a meeting in our conference room. It was maybe 10 to 15 people. Basically, everyone she supervised was in the room, and she was discussing ways that we can improve the way we did our reports. Someone asked a question, and instead of just answering it or discussing the problem with them later, she said in front of everyone that that particular employee was the problem with the reporting. The employee just went quiet. I assume they were shocked. Because they really didn't say anything else at all, they just sat there taking it. A couple hours later, we get called back into Ursula's office, and that employee was already gone. She told us the particular employee that she had the outburst with during that meeting was no longer going to be with us. This was really the first kind of unprofessional thing I'd ever witnessed in a workplace in my life. And here's the thing, when I'm really uncomfortable, I smile. It's not a happy smile. I guess I don't exactly know what to do. It's kind of just what my face does. So I'm sitting there forced to listen to this supervisor telling everyone that this person isn't going to be working with us anymore, and I'm afraid she's going to tell me someone else is going to be fired, so I'm sitting there with this uncomfortable smile on my face. She actually turns to the group and says, "Why is Sean smiling?" And inside I'm screaming, "Because I'm scared, lady, and this is very uncomfortable." But I didn't say anything. I just kind of sat there frozen like a deer in headlights, because I never expected to see this kind of behavior in the workplace. Boy, was I naive. I don't remember if anybody ever answered her question of why I was doing what I was doing, because I think everybody just kind of sat there in this horrible, awkward silence. So after that coworker was unceremoniously canned that day, they needed to find somebody else to do the job. And that's how her replacement came into the picture. This lady was awesome, and for all I know, she's still working there, serving her community, doing amazing, helping people. So when they named the replacement that Ursula hired, she immediately turned on her and decided this person didn't deserve this job and started making their life miserable. Ursula basically went out of her way to let everybody know that she thought this person was incompetent and they had racial bias. So even if they were, which they weren't, what does that tell you about Ursula's ability to hire good staff? Not very good, right? I can give you another example about how ridiculous this woman was. There were two departments in our building, programs and administration. Ursula managed programs, and someone else handled administration. One of our coworkers in administration was given an assignment by their supervisor, and they were working on it off hours. So picture an empty office building. Nobody's around by themselves, or at least it started that way. So whatever assignment they were given, I still don't know to this day. I wasn't there. They're playing some rock music, working on whatever assignment they were given. Ursula decides that she's going to work on off hours too. She comes into the building, hears the other coworker playing rock music, and decides that this is inappropriate, and goes to her supervisor to complain that she was hearing devil music in the building. You heard that right. Rock music is devil music. This will be a little important later. She wanted that employee reprimanded. Luckily, the supervisor for that employee realized she had better things to do and let it drop. So at least that one time, Ursula didn't get her way. She was trying to control everything. She would complain about how people were dressed even when it was professional because it wasn't her kind of professional. I remember her boss gave me assignments sometimes and I would ask her for feedback on them. She would just tell me not to do it because it wasn't an assignment given to me by her. And when I'd say, they're the executive director, didn't they tell me to do something? I remember her response was, well, what did I tell you to do? And I'm like, oh crap, it's like that. Okay. Her favorite number one victim was the person she hired to replace the person I told you about earlier in the story. She seemed to go out of her way to try to make that lady's life miserable. It got so bad that the employee went to the executive director to ask for help. Letters were written and complaints were made, and I'll never forget the day that the lady who I was friends with at that point comes to me and says, "We're going to have a meeting about how Ursula has been treating all the staff. I sure hope you speak up and say what you feel." I'm not gonna lie, Ursula scared me to death. You know that part of Game of Thrones where that one character, Jon Snow, scratches his sword across the ground and he's waiting for all those knights on those horses to come and get him and he's going to fight to the death? I didn't roll that way. I remember I called my dad, or I tried to call my dad, to ask for advice. My dad had worked for a Fortune 500 company for years, and he knew how to deal with people in difficult situations. So I wanted to ask my dad if I should diplomatically answer, telling the truth about how bad of a boss Ursula was, or should I pretend that it's not that bad to try to save my job? Well, I had to figure it out by myself because my dad didn't answer my call. While I wasn't like a superhero who ran screaming into a building to fight supervillains all by themselves, I did speak up and tell the truth. I let Ursula know how it was difficult to work with her sometimes and explained how every time we go to her with a problem, it kind of felt like we were bothering her like she had better things to do. She took the response and the answer, but I could tell from the look on her face she was not happy. Lucky for me, nothing happened because the executive director was in the meeting, and later he told me he appreciated my honesty. And later that same day for that meeting, the coworker who was Ursula's main victim, she came and she thanked me for being honest, and we were friends ever since. Last I heard, this lady still works there, and now she's a supervisor herself, doing a wonderful job in her community. You might think that Ursula would have calmed down and watched herself for a little while after this went down because they just had a meeting with the whole building basically saying that they have difficulty working with her. That's not how Ursula rolled. So apparently, her number one victim wrote a letter to management explaining that they were having a difficult time working with Ursula and they'd like to see some changes because they're really uncomfortable in work every day. Well, in management's infinite wisdom, instead of handling it privately or quickly, they showed Ursula the letter. This is the information I got from the coworker themselves. And instead of saying, okay, well, I'll do something to make it better, I think Ursula wrote her own letter alleging racism, incompetence, all kind of crazy stuff. So at that point, the company smelled hostile work environment, so they had to do something. I'll never forget the morning meeting. I call it the day the earth stood still. I was the only program employee that worked in the front of the building. Everyone else was up there, was either administration or the executive director. And those offices had glass where you could see right through. So it was like working in a fishbowl, and you always had to make sure you were doing the right thing because anybody at any time could just look right through and see exactly what you're doing. It doesn't matter that you had a door. So on that Monday, Ursula is going into a meeting with her boss. And I remember asking her if we still needed to fill out some community service forms or something that we have to, because our company worked on grants and you had to account for every minute of your day so we could keep getting funding. She told me that we did, and that was actually the last time I ever saw her. She went into the meeting, so I went down to my friend's office because I knew they had the forms. So at that point, we're talking about our weekend a little bit, and I'm starting to hear some yelling. I already told you my dad worked for a Fortune 500 company for 3 decades, and I used to hear the kind of language that was coming down the hall from his conference calls. So I thought, okay, they're angry with each other, they'll get over it, it's just Monday. My coworker, who I was talking to in their office, and they were older and a lot smarter to the world than I was at the point, starts getting nervous and she says, "Get the door, get the door." So I move over in my chair a little bit and I close the door. So the argument continues down the hall. At this point, Ursula is saying that they don't know what it's like to work in the back of the building. They're sneaky and underhanded. The company is going to fail, just all kinds of things. And they're trying to explain what they were doing and why they were doing it. And at that point, that's when you hear Ursula yell, "I don't give a flip what you do." Me still not getting it at this point, thinking, okay, just an heated argument. So after the argument passes the office that I was in, I go back up to my office and I get the rest of the story that I'd been missing. Allegedly, they told Ursula she had 2 options: apologize and go to anger management to save her job, or she was going to get fired. Ursula did not humble herself in front of management and told them F you basically and left. But she didn't leave without having a tirade through the building that is probably still talked about. Here's the part that I apparently also didn't witness because I wasn't able to look at the security cameras. She was throwing company files out of her car as she was peeling out of the parking lot, flipping them off as she went. Apparently, one of the other supervisors had to go all across the parking lot picking up the files that she flung out of her car. I didn't learn about the file flinging and the flipping of the bird until later. We were called into the conference room, and the executive director led off the meeting by saying, "If you witnessed any of that spectacle, I'm sure you figure out by now that Ursula is no longer with us. And we'd like for any and everyone to write a statement of whatever they witnessed so we have our documentation." Me being the scaredy cat I was at the time, still not believing that the blob was gone forever, thinking she might be like Dracula and come back, I said to myself, I ain't writing nothing in case they hire her again. I'm sure they had enough statements from everybody else. What I can say is after she was gone, it was like the sun came out over the building. It got a lot easier to work there, and all the stuff that she was stopping us from doing that everyone wanted to do to improve the company, they got to do, and everything started working so much better. Even the people that were friendly with her and liked her, they were glad she was gone too. I already told you, the day it all happened, I like to call it the day the earth stood still, like the Keanu Reeves movie. But my coworker who had to take the brunt of her crap likes to call it the day the house fell on her. I'm not gonna argue and tell her my way was better. She had to deal with even more crap than the rest of us did. You know how when bad leaders usually go, you find out about the stuff that they were hiding or doing behind your back? Yeah, we had some of that too. Apparently, those reports that she was complaining about not getting done correctly, she wasn't doing hers right either. And this is the real kicker. She was so religious that when she had a BlackBerry, a company phone, she would have different Christian songs to wake her up with different alarms. Yeah, that lady who was so worried about devil music, when her time was up, she was leaving the building, yelling and cursing and threatening on her way out. I don't think Jesus taught her that.
Not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
How do I know about music and the BlackBerry? Well, the employee that had to take the brunt of her garbage, they gave her the phone because she needed it for her clients. So maybe that was their final way of trying to exorcise the demons. I don't think my coworker ever found a way to get rid of all that Christian music. That phone did finally break years later. I'm not gonna lie. I still worry that I'm gonna run into Ursula sometimes, even though I don't live in the area anymore. She drove a red Monte Carlo, and whenever I see a red Monte Carlo somewhere, I think about her and I'm like, oh goodness, did she find me? I did end up having a supervisor once that had a similar name, so as soon as I saw her and I saw that they had a similar haircut, I thought, here we go again. Luckily, it didn't turn out like that. If you're enjoying this story, I've got another epic firing from my time with the company. But if you're really liking it, don't forget to like, share, and hit that subscribe button so more people can find me. I want to make this my job. I like telling you stories. I kind of look at Ursula like a villain of a week from Charmed or Buffy. So after she was vanquished, they did some company restructuring and they had to find an area to supervise one of the areas that she used to. The department I worked in was to help people get out of facilities, and I was the only person who did it. And my clients had some very special needs, so I was totally focused on them. So focused that I didn't always interact with my coworkers as much as I should. And you'll get a lot of that with this story. You're probably gonna think, gee, how were you so oblivious? So one day, a friend came up to my office to ask me how to refer someone to a charity because they needed some assistance. So I told her that I would come right down to her office to explain how it worked. So I grabbed a form, I go down to the bottom of the building, I'm explaining how the form works. Her supervisor comes up, we'll call her Cersei for purposes of the story. She tells me that I need to go back to my office and do my own work because her staff doesn't have time to do my job. I've already explained how oblivious I can be, So I think she's joking because no one's ever talked to me like that. So I literally laugh and say okay and go back to my office. Maybe 20 minutes later, Cersei comes back up and says she didn't realize her employee invited me down and was asking for help, so she was sorry. I accepted the apology, but I realized at that point, I need to watch this lady. Something weird might be going down here. And I think I called it right, because not too long after that, she talked to me in the hallway and tried to compliment me because I just finished helping someone to leave a facility, and she compared me to Harriet Tubman. Yeah, she thought it was a compliment. She literally said I was our own little Harriet Tubman. And I'm thinking, lady, that's not a compliment, especially telling that to a black person. Lucky for me, that was the only 2 solo incidents I had to deal with her. But apparently I was missing a lot. There's one day I remember where we had to do a company-wide training because we were using a new data entry system. When we have those days, we don't see clients, we spend the whole day training, and once we're finished, everybody gets to go home. So normally your day ends at 5, but if they finish everything up around lunch, you're done by 1. But Cersei had a whole bunch of questions specifically related to what she had to do. So every time she had a question, we had to stop what we were doing to handle her issue. That's when I started to notice that everyone in the room is grumbling. I try not to think too much about it because we've already established I'm oblivious. So maybe a few weeks later, they call us again into the conference room and they tell us that Cersei is no longer with the company. The associate director at the time then says, "May I lead the staff in singing Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead?" And at that point, there were actually a couple people that jumped up and started singing Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. I'm totally confused. But then again, at that point in my career, I spent most of my day in my office, so the world could have been ending around me and I might not have even known. I was pretty close friends with one of the people that worked on the administration team, so I asked her, why is everybody so happy? Then she explained that Cersei used to treat everyone like crap, particularly the administration staff, because she had a law degree and felt like she was smarter than everyone else, and would apparently send these crazy emails to her supervisor. She would talk down to everyone and expect them to help her do her work. So everyone else in the building was celebrating, and I'm just like, what's going on here? So I guess the Wizard of Oz was kind of a thing with that company. When you got fired, somebody was gonna be happy and do a Wizard of Oz number once you're gone. Funny enough, the person who replaced Ursula, they loved Wicked. And their ringtone at the time was actually one of the songs from the musical. So what can I say? I think the company had a type. If you enjoyed hearing stories from me and not from the internet, let me know in the comments. I've got more. Those were just 2 of the craziest ones that I could remember. If you're enjoying hearing crazy stories from my life, I got another one for you. I got a story about a personal care attendant who almost ruined my vacation when I went to visit my long-distance love. We're calling that woman Dolores, and it is definitely worth listening to. You will not believe the lengths this woman goes to try to ruin our vacation. See you next time.